think we'll go ahead and get started. I know we have some of the panelists here. Yoel, you ready to kick it off? Or I'll kick it off, but you ready to jump in after that? All right. So first of all, we'd like to thank everybody who's joining us today, everybody who registered, and thanking all the panelists who were able to show up today. I am Seconder Iqbal. I'm the Deputy Director here at Urban Peace Movement and representing the Alameda County DA Accountability Table. The Alameda County DA Accountability Table is a coalition of Bay Area community-based organizations who are committed to addressing root causes of violence, ending mass incarceration, advocating for police accountability, and eliminating racism from the criminal legal system. The table's members include ACLU of Northern California, Urban Peace Movement, Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, East Bay Community Law Center, the Justice Reinvestment Coalition, the Alameda County Participatory Defense Hub, the Anti-Police Terror Project, Policy Advocacy Clinic at UC Berkeley, School of Law, Oakland Rising, Color of Change, All of Us or None, and Restore Oakland. And with that, I will just like to be clear to say that this event is nonpartisan and the table will not be endorsing any candidates. And from there, I'll kick it over to Yoel to go over some of the logistics for today's panel.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the candidates for coming to our forum. I know you have a few other forums that are happening that you'll be attending just after you survived your 8-hour interview process, as I was saying earlier. So thank you for making the time. We appreciate you for showing up today and for being willing to answer our questions. We had a lot of people who are interested in being in this, attending this forum, a lot of Alameda County residents. So I'll just go over the format for today's panel, for today's candidate forum. We'll do intros and then we'll ask you questions. We have about, I think, 4 or 5 questions. We'll give each candidate 3 minutes to answer. At the 3-minute mark, we want you to stop. And if you don't stop, we will politely mute your mic just to make sure that we have enough time for everyone to answer and that this is fair for all of you. And then afterwards, we're going to have lightning round questions we're going to ask you where we're asking for a yes or no question answer only. And then lastly, we'll take audience questions. And after that, each of you will have, again, 3 minutes each for your closing statements. So I would really, really hate to have to mute anyone, so please be mindful of time. I watched some of you completely run over your 2-minute time at the board interview. So don't do that here. And we will, does that make sense? Do you have any questions before we jump in? Okay. This event is recorded and will be shared with the public as well. For those of you who are attending, our attendees, submit your questions to the moderators in the chat and we'll be able to lift those up as audience questions when the time comes for that portion. So we will jump ahead to the candidate introductions. So we will do 3 minutes each. I'll just go by the order that's in my in my screen. So it's no particular order, but I see Venus, Yibin, and LD in that order. So for the introductions, we'll start that way. We had 2 other candidates who may join us at some point, and they may jump in from where they're at, just as by way of heads up. But to start the time, Venus, you're going to have 3 minutes to introduce yourself to the public. And if we can highlight Venus.
Okay. I can only see a timer, so just want to make sure I should start now. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead and start, and then they'll start the timer, and the timer will help you kind of know when to wrap it up. But yeah, you can go ahead and start now. Start the timer when you start talking.
Fantastic. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for your time and that you've already invested in this process and for this evening. My name is Venus Johnson, and I am seeking the appointment to be the next District Attorney of Alameda County. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Oakland. I am the daughter of an immigrant mother, a single mom who raised her for a number of years, and a dad who was born and raised in West Oakland and eventually became a correctional officer with the Oakland Police Department. I became a deputy DA in Alameda County right out of law school, was there for 8 years, and then went on to serve for A.G. Harris. Fast forward, I worked recently under DA Becton as her chief assistant for a number of years, working on policies, overseeing a number of trial units there, homicide, juvenile, domestic violence, and also had a hand in a lot of the work around the law enforcement officer-involved shooting protocol in Contra Costa County. Worked heavily with community partners while I was there. Around immigration and certainly around charging decisions as well. And most recently, I have been with the Attorney General since 2021. I oversee a $1.3 billion budget, over 5,000 employees statewide. I oversee every legal division for the state of California. We work on matters such as human trafficking and gun trafficking, organized retail theft, fentanyl. I also oversee our division of law enforcement. We are the second largest Department of Justice in the country, only second to Main Justice. So the operation I run is large, but certainly touches all Californians. I also oversee the office's first conviction Justice Review Unit. We created that, which was something very important, and also our Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I have a lot of different skill sets, talent, and I'm looking to bring all of that back home to Alameda County, and I look forward to the conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venus. Next, we're going to have Yibin do his introductions. So if we can restart the timer to 30 minutes and highlight Yibin, and give us 1 second while we sort out the mechanics.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Start the timer when you start speaking.
All right, great. Thank you. Good evening, friends, colleagues, and members of the community. Thank you for this opportunity to share my vision for the Alameda County District Attorney's Office and to answer some of your questions. I currently serve as the City Attorney for the City of Alameda, and I've been the City Attorney for the City of Alameda for the last 6 years. And immediately prior to that, I was Chief Deputy City Attorney for the City of Santa Monica. I bring to you over 20 years of legal experience, a significant amount of that in prosecution work, but also a significant amount in other well-rounded areas of legal work, such as civil litigation, advice and counseling, and executive management in public agencies. I am proud of the prosecution and public safety work that I and members of my office have done in partnership with the community, and I want to, at least use these 2 minutes to share a bit of the work that we have done, including the successful launch of Northern California's first and only city prosecutor's office here at the City of Alameda, which went from handling over a few dozen cases just in 2019 to over 700. And in the words of the police chief, meaningfully reduces crime in the City of Alameda. And I believe we do so equitably, we do so fairly, and we do so holistically. In addition to prosecution and public safety work, I have spent a significant amount of my career handling housing and consumer justice work. I am incredibly proud of that work, both on the legislative side and on the enforcement and prosecution side. Examples of that work include our work in advocating for, drafting, and implementing local ordinances to limit source of income discrimination so that our most vulnerable friends, families, and neighbors can remain in their homes and could find homes in communities where otherwise might not be possible. I've also worked on important legislation that protects children from being evicted during school terms so that they and their families can remain stable during the educational terms. I'm also proud of the living minimum wage and sick leave ordinance that I worked on at the city of Santa Monica, and then subsequently led work to coordinate with Los Angeles County to enforce that important wage ordinance. Overall, I am proud of the prosecution, public safety, and housing work that both provides safety to our communities and protects housing stability and fair working conditions. I look forward to answering your questions, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Yibin. I know that some of you are asking if we could highlight the candidates and the big screen versus the smaller screen. For those of you who are seeing it that way, that's a setting on your computer. So if you go on the top left corner, the drop down button, if you click on that and you click on webinar, you will see the actual speaker highlighted that way, and we'll see the time tracker separately.
Yeah, or if you just click on the word webinar on the top, you could just click directly on it and it'll remove the timer from your screen.
Great. Thanks so much, Yibin. LD, you're next. Start the timer when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Latricia Louis, but I go by LD. Thank you for pulling together this forum so that we can have a discussion. I am a candidate, as you know, for the appointment to District Attorney, and I plan to bring a balanced approach to the criminal justice system here in Alameda County. So I started my career in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office after graduating from UC Berkeley School of Law. Before that, I attended Howard University. I am the daughter of a former police officer. I grew up in the city of Detroit and came to California as a teenager. And I fell in love with the Bay Area when I was looking at law schools, and I was determined to move here and stay here. So I moved to the Bay Area in 1996. I moved to Oakland in 1997, and I never left. So I've been in my home in East Oakland for the last 17 years. I'm raising my son here in East Oakland. He attends public schools where I volunteer. I'm deeply committed to my community. Engage in public service at my son's school and in my community, as well as my work. I was with the District Attorney's Office from 2000 until 2023, 2022, end of 22, and I'm now a Deputy County Counsel handling dependency work. So my vision for the District Attorney's Office, it's aligned with the vision of the Board of Supervisors. They have been engaged in initiatives for a number of years: Justice Involved Mental Health Task Force, Care First, Jail Last Task Force, and Reimagining Adult Justice. I was at the forefront of all of those initiatives. I'm traveling around the country, looking at programs and bringing best practices back to Alameda County in order to build solutions for our community surrounding the jail population. I built the CARES Navigation Center. I worked in collaborations between the local cities and the county to resolve these issues. And I believe my skill set that I've developed over the years is perfectly aligned with the needs of the county today in terms of our mental health crisis and some of the issues we're dealing with in our jail. And so I hope that as we discuss the issues tonight, you will have a better sense of our experience and vision and be able to make a decision about who you want to advocate for with the supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LD, and thank you to all three candidates for staying within the time. Sick, you have the next question.
All right. And just again, for anybody that's joining, if you're seeing a large timer on the screen and you want to see the candidates, On the top left of your browser, you'll see the word webinar. Just click on that. If that's highlighted, then you'll see the main panelist who's speaking, as well as the moderators and other panelists above the video. Just reminding folks, anybody who just joined, that's how you can adjust the setting. The first question, each of you will have up to 5 minutes to respond to the question. The question is for you to, can you please describe your first 100 days in office, including what your top priorities will be? And then we'll go and should we go in the same order, Yoel? Or do you want to switch the order?
Yeah, we'll go with Yibin, we'll start LD and then Venus, and we'll rotate it that way.
Okay, so if we could queue up Yibin, and then once you're up and you start talking, they'll start the timer. Are you muted? I think you're muted.
I'm.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead and start, and then as soon as you
I
start
wasn't quite sure when was the time to start. I didn't want to jump
I'll
ahead.
get it. You're good to go. Go ahead and jump in.
All right. Thank you. As I shared with the Board of Supervisors, the most important thing I think is to get race blind charging right, and I commit to doing that immediately. The law requires that we implement this at the beginning of the year. The City Attorney's Office has implemented race blind charging. We have, due to our very close collaboration with our colleagues at the District Attorney's Office, we have brought it to their attention. I am committed to ensuring that that's done immediately, quickly, so that we all comply with state law. Moving past that important point, similarly important is to ensure that we have the adequate staffing deployed so that we are reviewing cases, so that they do not time out before the statute of limitations. And then putting a little time out from those critical points. Certainly the budget is very important. I have a deep financial background. I was a CPA, and I worked as a business consultant prior to my legal career, and I want to bring that to bear and work on the DA's office's budget. I have had also the privilege of doing that in the last 6 years at the City of Alameda, being the head of an office. And so I know how that can get done, and I'm looking forward to partnering with the board, with the administrator's office, and with colleagues to ensure that the budget reflects the board's and the community's values and the office's needs to conduct its public safety work. And then on top of that, I want to hear both internally from colleagues in the office, attorneys, professional staff, inspectors, and externally. I've committed to the board that I will visit every city council, every elected special district, to hear concerns from the community, and then to bring that back to the office so that we can collaboratively find solutions to the community's problems. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We will reset the timer, and then we can bring up LD Louis. And then once you start speaking, they will start the timer. We have to unpin Yibin.
The speakers will remain pinned. Whoever is speaking,
All the
it
speakers.
should be largest, but again, it depends on your viewer settings, and every device seems to be a bit different. But you should be able to click on people or to choose to have the speakers larger than the content.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. LD, you can go ahead and whenever you start, they'll start the timer.
Thank you. So much is driven by budget. The way that the budget is structured in the county, it determines what positions are available, how many positions that you have available and what classifications. Really a budget analysis is essential at the very outset of entering the office in order to assess what other work there is. It's a little bit discouraging that we're not in alignment with the race blind charging. That's going to be an expensive undertaking. And so understanding, for instance, if there were any efforts made to allocate resources to be in compliance with that, because it calls for and requires additional staff, to be onboarded for that purpose. It might involve the addition of software and software licensing that the office doesn't have. All of that is tied to the budget. And so getting a handle on the budget, working with the CAO's office, identifying and recruiting a budget analyst are all essential in the early days coming into the office. In addition to that, there's a lot of redundancies within the divisions, within the staff. There are a lot of staff that don't have duties and things of that nature. And so an assessment of the current organization of the office, a restructuring and a reallocation of staff is pretty essential. In addition to that, we've had some major issues surrounding, this is also under staff and personnel, surrounding training, folks publicly saying that they were not really trained or qualified for the jobs that they were being placed in, the responsibility they're being given. That's not ethical. I mean, it actually violates the ethical canons. You're supposed to not handle cases that you don't feel that you have the skill set to handle. And so placing attorneys in assignments where they don't have the skill set, that is problematic. And so reassigning personnel so that they're in the right assignment for their skill set, and then building back the training program so that these new attorneys to the DA's office are ethical, competent, skilled in terms of their work is very essential. And so getting that process started is an early project that I intend to work on. In addition to that, we have a backlog of cases, both cases that need to be tried, cases that need to be reviewed for charging. And so diving into that backlog is going to be very important. And that, of course, also is a piece of the staffing and what the staffing needs are going to be to make sure that that's being managed. Now, there's a lot that has to be gotten on track in the early days, and a part of that is working with, a strong management team that can help with the lift of some of the other projects that also need to be worked on in early days. We have to deal with issues within the inspectors division, within victim witness, because there's also a huge training challenge there. But focusing on just getting back to basics within the office, getting the wheels of justice turning again in a competent, ethical fashion, those are my early priorities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LD. We are going to now kick it over to Venus. And once you see the timer restarted, you can start talking and they'll start the timer.
All right, great. Thank you. So the first 100 days, like a marathon, and you'll blink and it'll be past you. But what everyone is mentioning, what is so important, and me running the budget at DOJ now, Cal DOJ, it's the only way you can do business. So, we have just a few weeks to get a budget together. But what a budget does, it not only sets your priorities, but it also gives the community a directive and an understanding of where your investments will be and what do those relationships and budgetary line items look like. And so really trying to also get a handle and be really tapped in the work that I'm actually currently doing. We know there will be federal dollars that will be at stake. A large chunk of the budget for the DA's office comes from federal grants. A large chunk comes from state grants. And then, there are other monies and, revenue sources certainly that come in from the work that the office does. And so really understanding and getting a handle there, assembling obviously my executive team, but the budget also is going to give me an idea of vacancies, right? How much hiring can you do? Do I have staff that are prepared and skilled and the right people in the right places doing the type of work that they should be doing? case management system, really wanting to get an understanding of the cases and how they're flowing through the office, right? And so that means meeting with law enforcement, that means meeting with community, that means understanding kind of where the hiccups have been and ensuring that the case management system is where we need it to be, because you've got one shot at this budget for this coming fiscal year to get those things right. I need a forensic accountant to come in and do some scrubbing, right, to understand really the last 5 years, not just the last few. And so embracing and digging into all of that. Recruitment and retention are huge. Certainly, getting an immigration policy in place immediately. That is very important for me. I did this work in Contra Costa County. The model I created there is being used statewide and nationwide. A lot of work and sweat and tears and community involvement and stakeholder involvement went into place putting that policy together. The lawyers also need to be trained on what it means, certainly in the light of the federal system and what we'll be experiencing. They need to understand, obviously, what federal and state law require, right, around considering immigration consequences for pleas, and that needs to really happen immediately. The other thing certainly is having to, frankly, rescind any current policies and directives in place. You will find and you will hear and you will learn, if you don't already know about me, that I am balanced. That is where you will find me, is certainly being very thoughtful about public safety, but also being very thoughtful about how policies impact community, and understanding that we don't need to widen the net, but we certainly need to focus on accountability. Serious and violent offenders must be held accountable. And so thinking through just the basics and the daily on how the work is done, meeting with community, meeting with victims, really also thinking about working with probation and public health, thinking through what prevention, diversion, alternatives to incarceration currently exist in the office. That's really, really important to me, and having the funds to be able to create those partnerships. Sitting down with both DA Jenkins and DA Becton, right, and thinking about how we can pull ourselves together in this part of the region of Northern California and what our counties are experiencing. Sitting down with certainly the chiefs, and also understanding the different communities and what they're experiencing, they have experienced. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about is how you engage with community. It can be really triggering sometimes to talk about you being a victim, your experiences being incarcerated, your experiences just with the criminal justice system in general. And so I want to be very thoughtful. I've worked with RJoy when I did a lot of work as the director of public safety in the city of Oakland. And so I want to tap into certainly those tools in order to engage in community in a respectful and a very healthy way. So thank you.
Thank you, Venus. I'm going to pass it back over to Yoel to get us into the next question.
Great. Our next question, and I think we're going to start with LD first, then we'll go to Venus and to Yibin. Our next question is, how do you plan to address mass incarceration and the disproportionate impact of the criminal legal system on communities of color in Alameda County?
So, as a lot of folks know about me, for more or less the last decade of my career, that has been my focus. So I built the mental health unit in the district attorney's office with an eye towards how we can best move folks who are experiencing mental health crises, substance use disorder, out of the jail, out of the criminal justice system, and into treatment. That unit was doing great work, working both at the local and state level, and driving forward efforts to move folks away from the jail. And so some of that was collaboration with the folks who were mentally ill. So, for example, I started up a system where parents could reach out to the DA's office and supply a form that has been authorized by the state for many years to law enforcement. And I made sure that that form through my unit was making it into the files of prosecutors across our agency as they were evaluating charging decisions or evaluating disposition decisions, because there are factors of mitigation to help move individuals out of the system. Obviously, I built the CARES Navigation Center, which was a pre-charging mental health and diversion program. And this was a big breakthrough. I had to get buy-in from our police departments in the county to bring individuals to the Navigation Center instead of the jail. The Navigation Center provided respite. The Navigation Center provided referral and transportation directly to warming centers, to treatment beds from that location. We had strong buy-in from the Sheriff's Department, from BART. We were working and collaborating with Macro in Oakland. We had Fremont and San Leandro and Hayward Police Department utilizing our services regularly. The center was located in the Fruitvale in Oakland. It was the only program at the time that provided service for respite for substance use disorder. So one thing that folks don't know, if you have a mental health crisis at John George and you go to John George and you're under the influence, then a lot of times you're immediately released from the hospital because they say, well, that's substance use disorder, not mental health. We wanted to fill that gap and then identify a problem. And so we provided CARES, and we added on substance use disorder so law enforcement could bring to the Navigation Center instead of taking those folks to Santa Rita Jail. So it's that kind of initiative. You know, that program came from going and collaborating at the federal level and looking at programs back east and down south for best practices to bring to the Bay Area. But it's not just lifting a program whole cloth from another jurisdiction. We have a very diverse population here. We have language, just a diverse population that's not reflected in other parts of the country. So we then had to build out a program that was multilingual, multicultural. That's what CARES was. And we were able to drill into the disparities in people of color. It's a known data point in Alameda County that most African-American males receive their first mental health treatment in Santa Rita Jail. We started to drill into that by getting them into the Navigation Center. So it's that understanding of some of these issues surrounding incarceration in certain populations, understanding what's happening in the county and what the trends are, what the data are, the work that I've been doing for years that I intend to build on as the district attorney to continue to move the population that can be moved out of the jail and into appropriate treatment settings. Obviously, we have an enforcement need and serious and violent offenses have to be dealt with, but we absolutely can and should move individuals out of the justice system that can be more successfully served in rehabilitative programs. And I'm committed to that work.
Thank you so much, LD. Venus, I think you're up next.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for the timer. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So obviously, race-blind charging has been mentioned quite a bit, and our office, DOJ, issued at the beginning of the year kind of a directive, if you will, to all 58 counties, all 58 DAs on kind of what the model for each office, right, should look at and consider. So they were guidelines, and definitely I think that is something that certainly is imperative. I met with Stanford when they were running the pilot programs to do this with, I believe, the DA of Yolo County, who was working on this as well. And so I'd really love to go back and certainly sit down with them after getting a handle on Alameda County system and seeing what they can do to support certainly getting that up and running. The other things I really want to mention are things that I've done that I'd like to bring to Alameda County, specifically around youth and diversion. I was over the juvenile in Contra Costa, and we set up a diversion program for youth who committed certain types of offenses. And it was accountability-based, victim-centered, and really focused on a holistic approach We worked with RISE and Impact Justice to put this model forward and set it up and put it together using certainly data around certain ages, certain types of offenses, and looking at red flags for youth around deterrence, right? And ensuring that we're not continuing to funnel them into a system and instead diverting them out. Charging policies and practices are obviously really important, and you're wanting to certainly hold people accountable. You certainly don't want to overcharge because that is obviously very important. And certainly we do not want to mass incarcerate. We are not going to incarcerate ourselves into safety. And so we have to have balanced and thoughtful approaches to doing both of those things. I think a part of looking at mass incarceration is certainly those that are already incarcerated. And so conviction review is something that I've done in Contra Costa. I've done at the state level as well, working with For the People and setting up a model. And DAs now, right, can proactively petition a court. If you think about, the 80s and the 90s and other time periods and types of offenses, right, where 3 strikes may have been heavily used on certain types of offenses, and really looking at an individual's history, right, since they've been incarcerated. Where does the victim stand? What is their voice, right, in this process? And so we really put together a very holistic model in Contra Costa, and we're very thoughtful and certainly and had to be selective, certainly, but you've got to start somewhere. And so I think that's very important to look at. Record expungement was something certainly very important as well. It allows people, right, to remove the barriers so that they can get employed, so that they can get housed, so that they can volunteer at their child's school, right, for field trips, so that they can get a license to do certain jobs or professions with the state. And so it's the front end, it's the middle, it's the back end, and certainly mental health and substance abuse are things that you have to think about because those are things certainly that can lead folks into certainly the criminal justice system. And we certainly want to be thoughtful, looking at the care first, courts last, and looking at all the initiatives in the county. And the DA must be a partner. I'd also really like to focus on women. That's a population that sometimes I don't think gets enough attention, and women re-entering our community. We are mothers, we are caretakers, we are providers, and the backbones of really our communities. And the last thing I want to mention is I've been really talking with labor around workforce and development, and a program that is in Contra Costa that allows folks who are entering and coming home to be partnered with labor and to get a job. There are a number of sites in our community in Oakland that are willing to welcome folks in. And so I'd really like to partner with them in order to create certainly opportunities for those returning citizens who are coming home, and always dealing with the root causes: education, kids, data, reading grade levels. I could go on, but I won't. But anyway, those are just some of the things that I would be focusing on.
Thank you. Yibin, we'll start the clock and you're next.
All right, thank you. I agree with my colleagues. It really does have to be a holistic and everything on board approach to addressing this issue. Race-blind charging, I've shared my earlier points about that. Absolutely. On finding ways to divert mental health, substance abuse, and unhoused individuals committing low-level offenses out of the system is truly the right path forward. Data has shown that again and again that relying on mass incarceration does not make a community safer. Finding ways for offenders to return to a normalized community where there is dignity is really the right approach. And so on that note, it's really looking at every possible tool to see if they work, use data-driven tools to continuously evaluate programs to see whether or not our dollars are being properly spent and it's actually having real results, and making changes all the time to ensure that we do the very best. in every respect, which is, we need to look at expanding pre-charging diversion. I similarly agree that we need to look at finding navigation centers that accept a large range, all range of the concerns that of the folks experiencing these various conditions, so that they can have wraparound services, so that they don't have to go to jail on their first offense, and that they can find connections to housing, to jobs, to communities, so that they can return to the community and not go back to reoffend in the same way, which is what would happen. And we see that over and over and over again. And on the children's front, same. We need to find support services. We need to find counselors that reflect the language, immigration concerns, culture diversity of the kids that might have to experience interaction with the justice system. If they're being ordered to seek counseling, they should find counselors that reflect who they are, so that they can confide in them, and so that they can they can return to school, return to their families, and not spend time at juvenile hall, and certainly not spend time at jail. And so all of these tools must be on the table, but the district attorney's office can't do it alone. The district attorney's office needs to partner across the county with cities, special districts, community groups. An example of a successful program is that the city of Alameda launched its own care program, where the firefighters and mental health professionals respond first, instead of law enforcement, to 911 calls where appropriate. Those are usually persons experiencing mental health conditions, potentially substance abuse, potentially unhoused individuals committing low-level offenses, and really just needing services. That program has been incredibly successful. I would seek to advocate for more jurisdictions to adopt programs like that, and to really find ways to make their community safer through that level of collaboration. And what makes that program really great is that it's a collaboration between government, the city, its fire department, its police department, and community-based organizations that provide those case managers, those counselors. The Alameda Family Services does exactly that. And so it is possible to bring everyone together to find solutions. No single solution will solve the problem. We have to look at all of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yibin. Thank you, Yibin. I think, Sik, you're going to ask the next round of questions. And just to make sure we have enough time for audience questions at the end, we're going to start to put the response time to 3 minutes, because we still have quite a few questions to get through, and audience questions that are already popping up. So with apologies, we're going to bring down the response time to 3 minutes. And then, Sik, you have the next question.
Okay. This is a little bit of a longer question, so I'm also going to put it in the host and panelist chat. I think the order for this one will be, correct me if I'm wrong, Venus, Yibin, and then LD. So I'll read it out, and then I'll put it in the chat for you all as well. The previous administration implemented several key policies, including limiting youth transfers to adult court and the use of sentencing enhancements, and created a public accountability unit to investigate and prosecute law enforcement misconduct. What will your approach to these initiatives be if elected? Explain in detail if you would continue, modify, or expand upon these current policies and practices. And Venus, you'll be up first.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of things. I think that it is certainly very, very, very important to be very thoughtful, as I have mentioned. Being the DA is a powerful position. You have the pen, right? And in a stroke of a pen, you can change someone's life forever. And so, and a victim's life is also potentially impacted forever. And so the balance that I think you have to have in thinking about the work and the approach to the work is one that I bring to the table. transfers for juveniles. So the science is clear, right? We know the brain development, the ability to be able to assess risk and balance cost benefit analysis, and the immediate gratification versus understanding just simply risk, right, and engaging in certain behavior and activity develops for youth later in life, and it's different for males than it is for females as well. So a committee is what I would put forth to specifically go through any and every case where there was a question. I do not believe there is an absolute no to any case for anything, but I think you have to thoughtfully and accurately weigh certainly all of the things and all of the studies and all of the science that we know about those practices. I think the same goes for enhancements. I think every case has to be evaluated. It has to be evaluated fairly. It has to be evaluated thoughtfully. You have to look at mitigating and aggregating factors, but it also is a part of who you're putting in charging positions. You can have a policy, and it doesn't mean it'll be followed if you don't have the right people in the right positions. DA Becton and I learned a lot about doing that in Contra Costa County. And so me understanding how to set up units, putting policies in place, and trainings are certainly things that are extremely, extremely important. Investigating misprosecution or of law enforcement misconduct. I don't care what your title is or what your zip code is. Every single person is held accountable, and every single person is held to the same standard. People who take an oath of office or an oath to protect the public certainly have a relationship and a role of trust with the public. And when that trust is broken, it dismantles the trust. It doesn't just crack it. Being transparent, being thoughtful, having the right committee and right folks reviewing those cases and continuing that work is something that I do now at the AG's office. I did it under DA Becton. I know how to do it, and putting the right people and having my team in place is really as much as part of having the policy in place. So those are the things I would do.
Thank you so much for your response. We're going to go ahead and kick it over to Yibin. You can start whenever you like, and the timer will start when you begin talking.
All right, thank you. With respect to transferring children, as I shared with the board, the default is that children should not be prosecuted as adults, and that's what the law provides, and that's appropriate given the science. As I shared earlier with you and with the board, the appropriate thing for us to do is to find appropriate support services that are reflective of the communities, the wide-ranging communities that are that make up Alameda County, so that children can return to school and to their homes and not spend time in juvenile hall, and certainly not spend time in jail. If there is the aberrational case that requires further consideration, I agree. It needs to be incredibly thoughtfully reviewed by a team of people who understands the holistic impacts to that decision. And of course, a court will ultimately make that decision, even if the office makes that request. It's important to point out that under the law, a court would only grant that request if the court finds essentially that the child is incapable of being rehabilitated. And in order for the court to make that finding, I think a part of our thinking has to be that, has that child received the necessary and appropriate and the right amount of support in the juvenile system? And there is where I go back to, we need to really find, funding, whether it's grant funding within the DA's office, countywide funding, statewide funding, to ensure that we have robust support systems in place so that there are multiple off-ramps of the justice system for any child that comes in contact with the justice system. With respect to your other question on, I believe your other question has to do with charging. I just want to make sure that I'm answering that question.
Yeah, I also put it in the chat in case you need to reference it, but it says the question was, the policies that were implemented by the previous administration were limiting youth transfers to adult court, limiting use of sentence enhancements,
Law enforcement
police,
target.
police accountability, public accountability unit to investigate and prosecute law enforcement misconduct.
Yes, for that, I mean, whether you're a law enforcement official, an elected official, an appointed official, the law applies with equal force across the board. And so it doesn't really, it doesn't matter that a public integrity unit is common across DA's offices and investigate a full range of crimes that might be reported, whether it's from law enforcement or elected or appointed officials. And I think that serves an important function in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And once the timer is reset, LD, go ahead and jump in. Whenever you start, the timer will begin.
LD, you're on mute.
Thank you. So we've acknowledged that in the juvenile justice system that there isn't discretion with the district attorney to direct file anymore. And there's a sort of a presumption against filing in the adult system. And so, that's a petition to a judge. The judge makes the ultimate determination. But this is where I think collaboration is key. And this is where I think a advisory body to develop a policy to guide the discretion of the prosecutors in our juvenile division is valuable. And so that I think that has to be a collaboration between, activists and community members, but also victims of crime and some of the folks in that movement, so that there's a balancing of the interests at play within the criminal justice system surrounding, these issues of safety and next steps. In terms of enhancements, and this is a global, like every policy that's in place right now must be reviewed such that, as I've stated before, there's a balanced approach that is a pro-safety approach and a approach that includes victims of crime. And is thoughtful about community impacts. But in terms of enhancements, a lot of this is also about training and, appropriate guiding the discretion of the lawyers that are in the charging positions that make these decisions. Historically, charging DAs have always been more seasoned, senior lawyers because of the importance of, the training and experience that needs to be had to engage in sound charging decisions. And I think that's an important practice to return to. I've done a lot of training across the state within the office, built training programs. And I think that'll be one of the first things I intend to work on to make sure folks are trained and qualified to do the work. And then with the public protection division, and the office for many years has had a public protection division. It was renamed. That division looked both at police officer misconduct as well as elected officials, government officials, pretty much anyone in positions of trust. I think it's a vital component. We have these positions of trust, and we need to hold ourselves to the highest standards. That would be a unit that remains staffed as it's been for most of my career in the DA's office, with skilled attorneys that are mid to later career who have the experience to investigate and successfully prosecute those cases. And so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, LD. I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to Yoel, who's going to start us off on the lightning round.
All right. Thank you all. We'll switch it up for a little bit. It will be yes or no questions, answers only. I think we're gonna have about maybe 6 or 7 questions. Just tell us what your answer is, no explanations. And I will start, and I will start with the easiest one. And I'll just put a little bit of context. The DA accountability table, which Sig had mentioned, is made up of about a dozen community-based organizations and civil rights organizations in Alameda County, has been meeting with the DA's office under Nancy O'Malley and under Pamela Price about every month. to go over various issues that we're encountering, that people are coming to us with, to lift up to you our policy and case level priorities that we're seeing happen in the community. Sometimes, we would get situations where your directive says something else, but the line prosecutors are doing something else, and this was a way for us to bring that to the DA's attention. So the first question, and I'm not going to have this kind of context for the rest of the questions, but just wanted to start with that. And Yibin will start, so we'll go Yibin, LD, Venus, and that round for all of them, just for ease. So the first question is, if you are appointed DA, will you meet with the Alameda County DA Accountability Table on a monthly basis to help inform your policies and practices? Yibin?
Yes.
LD?
Yes.
Venus?
Yes.
Right. Next question. If you are appointed, will you run in the 2026 election to keep the seat? And second, will you accept endorsements or financial contributions from law enforcement unions? Yibin?
I will run. I've not decided on the second question.
LD?
Yes, I will run. I have not decided.
Venus?
Yes, I will run, and no, I have not decided.
Okay. Next question. Will you presumptively decline to prosecute low-level offenses related to personal use of drugs, traffic, sex work, and other quality of life offenses that are often a byproduct of a person experiencing poverty or homelessness? Yibin? Yes or no, please?
I'm not sure I can answer that question.
LD?
Can you restate the first part?
Will you presumptively decline to prosecute low-level offenses related to personal use of drugs, traffic, sex work, or other quality of life offenses that are often a byproduct of a person experiencing poverty or homelessness?
Presumptively, no.
Venus?
No.
Next question is, will you adopt a written policy and training that instructs prosecutors to avoid adverse immigration consequences for non-citizen community members? Yibin?
Yes.
LD?
I don't think I can answer that one at this time.
Thank you. Venus?
Yes.
Next question. Will you publish data on prosecutorial decision-making and case outcomes through an accessible dashboard and the office's policies and protocols on the office's website? Yibin?
Yes.
LD?
Yes.
Venus?
Yes.
Thank you. Next one is, will you commit to never seek the death penalty? Yibin?
Yes.
LD?
Yes.
Venus?
Legally, a prosecutor can't. So I can't say I can commit to that.
Next question. Will you commit to keeping all children out of adult court by not prosecuting minors as adults? Yibin?
No.
LD?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Will you commit to keeping all children out of adult court by not prosecuting any minors as adults?
No.
Venus?
No.
Okay. Last question for lightning round. Will you swiftly, thoroughly, and transparently investigate officer-involved shootings and police brutality cases and make your findings public? Your either charging memos or your declination of charging memos, will you make those public? Yibin?
Yes to the first part. I'm not sure I can answer a yes or no to the second part.
LD?
I don't think I can answer that, and I do have an ask or point of clarification.
Yeah, go ahead. What's the point of clarification?
On the death penalty question,
We can come back to that after we finish this
okay,
question. So,
thanks.
Venus.
Yes, I will. If I'm remembering the question, yes, I will swiftly investigate, and yes, I will make findings public.
Thank you. LD, you had a point of clarification on the death penalty question?
Yeah, so what I've said publicly, I think is more consistent with Venus's response. I just didn't know how to answer the question, quite frankly, with how it was phrased. So I think legally I cannot agree with that.
Yeah, thank you.
I assume the question was, do we support and will we seek death penalty cases?
Yeah, will you, the question was just to repeat that. Will you commit to never seek the death penalty?
I do not support the death penalty and do not expect to seek it.
Thank you. Thank you all. That wraps up our lightning round questions. We just wanted to add some fun questions in the middle of all your thoughtful responses, and we will now continue with the rest of our questions. Sick. And the time will be 3 minutes for the rest of the questions.
All right. Excuse me. Well, who will go first this time? Who went first? I lost track during the lightning round. Yoel, so if you can help cue that up, and I'll ask the question.
LD will go first.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you plan to work with and balance the perspectives of stakeholders, such as elected officials, county departments and services, victims, reform advocates, and policy experts in the course of developing policies and programs? And I'll put that in your chat as well so you can reference it.
Thank you. So how I've engaged in collaboration in the past is quite frankly by outreach. It's relationship building. It's inviting conversation and having an open door. So, an example of that is, for instance, when I wanted to change the way that we approach charging in the office, such that our charging DAs were looking at alternatives to incarceration at the point of charging, which we had not been doing before. I reached out to our collaborative court partners, which are, behavioral health agencies. There's community-based organizations behind them that provide the services, and the Office of Collaborative Court Services in the court. And we had a discussion surrounding what would this do to the volume of cases seen in the courts. What types of things would they be concerned about with the policy? I collaborated with the Public Defender's Office when I was building the CARES Navigation Center, because I wanted to have a sense of what their feelings were about the DA's office engaging with, folks who are coming in contact with law enforcement and potentially facing charges, and we were working to divert them at an early phase. And so I built some of the concerns or insights of the defense bar into the protocol. And so it's having the willingness to communicate with folks that have all different types of viewpoints, have all different types of roles in the system. I went at a time when we were, trying to figure out our next steps. I went back east and down south, looking at programs, talking to law enforcement. How are they tackling their homelessness? How are they, tackling their substance use disorder issues through SAMHSA, a federal agency that deals with these issues, and worked on best practices. And so you have to be constantly ready to learn, re-educate yourself, and look not just in California or in your county, but around the country. I was just reading about an awesome program that's been getting great reviews in the city of Detroit, which is my hometown, where they've been building out a system that works in partnership with Ceasefire, but works with community-based organizations, that has brought down the homicide rate in the city by 36%, which, is huge for a city with the number of homicides that Detroit has had. over the many years. And so it's being open to the conversation, reaching out, and being very open-minded and continually able to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and cue the timer back up, and Venus, you'll jump in next.
Great, thank you. I think collaboration is probably one of my many assets and what I bring to the work. It takes a lot to lift programs. It takes a lot to build programs. It takes a lot sometimes just applying for grants for programs, right? And so my thought is, one, obviously regular meetings with my community, regular meetings certainly with victims and businesses and those being impacted by crime, those being impacted by policies and practices, not only my office, but perhaps the county, right, has in place, and really being thoughtful around listening. That is something that I think is one of the most important things to do, is to honestly just sit and listen to people and their perspectives. Data and numbers can tell one story, but if people don't feel what the numbers reflect, then the numbers don't matter at the end of the day. And I think an example of something that I've done around safety is Holly Mini Park in East Oakland. When I was working for the mayor of Oakland, I believe safe spaces and places are important for community. We heard the community's needs of wanting to revamp that park. It was filthy, filled with needles. Kids couldn't play. Seniors couldn't walk around and exercise. And in partnership with a number of private sector folks, we got some money along with the public sector, and that park was revamped a couple years ago. And so it's really a beautiful thing when community and government can come together and actually deliver something. I'm also looking to have specific liaisons with my office so people can get direct access and also feel like they have direct access, frankly, to the DA as well. That's very, very important to me. Also, sitting down certainly with the public defender's office, who obviously is a big partner, and probation, and the sheriff's department and the other executives within the county, and understanding the initiatives that they're trying to put forth. My understanding is that there's been a breakdown in partnership, that there are a lot of great ideas, but I'd like to be the collaborator that brings all sides to the table to really be able to move the needle forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Venus. The clock is reset. Even you can start whenever you like, and the clock will follow you.
Thank you. Being collaborative across community groups, elected officials, and city staff is literally an everyday job for me, to find that consensus, to move important, or even just the mundane municipal programs forward. We have to do that every single day, and I expect to bring that to the district attorney's office. I'll start with the city council, right? I mean, the city council is made up of 5 elected individuals that each, no doubt, has their strong visions, and they're not always the same. It is my job to work with them to find a cohesive path forward. And I think their unanimous support for my candidacy demonstrates my ability to do that. 2 other examples briefly is that our public safety work, prosecution unit's public safety work, requires deep collaboration with our police department. We do that in a way that's, I think, unique in the county, and that we're deeply embedded at the police department. We, in fact, have prosecutors that sit in the police department to provide that layered and responsive interaction. We attend command staff meetings where when they're engaging in data-driven approach to crime fighting and to create programs to deal with specific incidents, prosecutors are there and understand what their law enforcement partners are actually doing and could be better partners in that regard. And finally, on the issue that I alluded to earlier on wage enforcement, we at the city of Santa Monica, once we adopted the program, we sought out and partnered with Los Angeles County, where county staff was doing enforcement work. City attorney's office prosecutors were handling both support education, advice, and prosecution work with county staff. It's that collaborative approach across organizations and within organizations that I would bring to the district attorney's office. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to Yoel, and we're going to open up with some of the audience questions. Thank you, everyone, for all the questions you've sent in. We won't be able to ask all of them, obviously, but I'll go ahead and kick it over to Yoel to see which ones we'll be able to get in with the time that we have.
Great, and we're gonna probably lower the response time to 2 minutes just to see if we can cover more audience questions. Since we got a lot of great questions. So the first question is around diversion and alternatives to incarceration. The question is, what is your vision for the DA's office's relationship with other Alameda County departments to support diversion and alternatives to incarceration, such as macro, CARES, probation, and other departments? And we will have 2 minutes to respond. And I think LD, you went first, right? The last round. So it's back to Venus going first.
Thank you. So my vision is one of collaboration and being extremely thoughtful in this. As I mentioned, I have done this before around creating diversion programs. But what I really also want to do for Alameda County specifically, right, and for each city specifically, is to think through what that portion or part of the county certainly needs. Different youth need different things as well. There are different CBOs that work in different parts of the county, and particular to men, particular to women, particular to juveniles. There's BOSS, there's Essie's Justice Group, there's Health Right 360, there's Our Joy, right? There are a number of just great partners within the county. And so leveraging those relationships, but also ensuring that the victims' voices are heard, that is very important to me. And also having them be a part of, and their voice be a part of, whatever initiatives are put forward, because this is public safety for the entire county, for all of us, not some of us. And so public safety is certainly essential, but we also get there by prevention, by intervention, and by diversion, getting folks jobs, partnering with labor, partnering with workforce development boards, school systems, thinking about reading grade levels in our cities and places within our neighborhoods that see the most shootings and the most violence in their communities, and what that's doing to our youth. And we're expecting children to go in and sit down and learn after there has been, right, how many shootings in their neighborhood over the last week. And so it's partnering with everyone at all levels to understand specific needs. And that's how I would approach the work.
Thank you. Yibin?
I'll wait for the timer to reset. Yes, I certainly would approach it in a collaborative and holistic way. We have to build relationships across the county with all agencies to ensure that we have the tools available to find the right diversion program. As I alluded to earlier, it's in addition to tools, it's also about a data-driven approach to make sure that our diversion programs are actually working. Right. All public programs cost money. I want to make sure that they actually work and that are dollar effective in actually diverting people out of recidivism. There, I absolutely want to hear from all community inputs, law enforcement agencies, elected officials everywhere to see where we have more need, where we may have blind spots, and where we could do better. And then we need to keep working on it to make sure that we do the very best we can. An example I shared earlier was the CARES program that the city of Alameda implemented that allowed mental health professionals and firefighters to respond to certain types of cases. I think that's a great way to limit the necessity of individuals that really won't be helped by interacting with the justice system. And I look forward to supporting more of those types of programs across the county. Thank you.
Thank you. LD?
Thank you. So I'm going to build on the relationships that I already have. When I built the CARES Navigation Center, that was in collaboration with probation and behavioral health care. The relationships I built with these departments were such that behavioral health care built the work we were doing in the DA's office into the Mental Health Services Act funding that they had for the department because they wanted to support our work. When I secured $9 million from the Board of Supervisors to expand CARES and to 2 other facilities in East and South County, I started collaborating with the Sheriff's Department in addition to the work we were doing to divert folks away from the jail already and their staff bringing them to CARES. We were talking about this issue where folks were being released from the jail, and there was, the location that they had at the jail was just sort of giving them a clipper card and a ride to BART. It was my assessment that that was insufficient, and talking with, police partners, with community partners. And so we were looking at building a CARES location there. And BART was also telling us, and the cities were telling us that that was the end of the BART line. Mentally ill folks, unhoused folks were ending up being pushed out of the BART station at that location. So we wanted to have an assessment ability there. So I would be building on existing relationships to expand these programs. I understand the city systems. I was already working with Macro. I was already working, which is a City of Oakland program. I was already working with the CAT team through behavioral health care. So it would be building on top of that. And dialing back into those relationships in order to drive the work forward more rapidly.
Thank you, LD. We'll start the next audience question, and we'll start with Yibin. The question is, people who are not U.S. citizens are entitled by law to have their conviction vacated under certain circumstances. Several Bay Area DA offices have become more obstructionist in their policies with regard to these vacators and vacating these convictions. If you were appointed, would you commit to reviewing the office's policy with a view towards streamlining the review process and protecting people from being deported? If the current status quo continues, people are going to be deported for decades-old drug possession cases if the office continues to drag its feet on these. So there's some urgency, obviously, with the new administration. So the question is to Yibin. You have 2 minutes.
If the question is, would I streamline our review on motions to vacate convictions? Like all governmental programs, I want to make sure that we are adequately dedicating our resources in a way that's both efficient and effective. And in everything, whether it's this or everything else, it is absolutely my goal to streamline our process to ensure that it's running appropriately and effectively. Obviously, without commenting on specific cases, I am committed to ensuring that the office operates in a way that is consistent with the community's values, and it's operated in a way that is highly efficient so that we can use the limited budget dollars that were allocated to appropriately put them in the right places to make the maximum difference. Thank you.
Aldi, you're next.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. People who are not U.S. citizens are entitled to have their conviction vacated under certain circumstances. Several Bay Area DA offices have become obstructionists in their policies with regard to vacating these convictions. If you were appointed, would you commit to reviewing the office's policy with a view towards streamlining the review process? Because people are going to be deported for decades-old possession cases if the office drags its feet on this.
Right. So, yes, I was supervising that work under the collaborative courts. We had a coordinator doing that before the last regime, looking at expungements under various provisions and then reporting out our progress with expungement of cases where it was appropriate. We had a set court date that was a part of our collaborative courts where we were facilitating that, and a part of the guidebook that I drafted was guidelines to help facilitate. So it's building on work that we were already doing. I want to convey, like, before the last regime, we were the place where people came to figure out how to do these things in their DA's offices. We had the most alternatives to incarceration of any DA's office in the state of California. People were coming and lifting our model for the Navigation Center and other programs and taking it to other places. And so a lot of this work that we're talking about, we were sort of pioneers doing it. And I'm all on board with making sure that folks that should have things cleared off of their records so that they can reintegrate into society is absolutely happening. And so I'll build on the programs that we had previously in order to move those initiatives more quickly.
Venus, you're up next.
Thank you. The answer is, of course, yes. Again, the policy I wrote is the model for the state and the nation. Frankly, it's being touted by ILRC. And so it's so important that things move swiftly in Contra Costa. In the immigration policy, vacature was obviously part of that policy. And again, you can have everything written that you want, but if you don't have the right people and the right positions, you get bottlenecks, you get confusion, and sometimes there is even stallage, right? And so when you're dealing with people trying to ensure that they aren't deported, when you're ensuring that certainly public safety is certainly being weighed, but when you're talking about simple possession cases from decades ago, myself and Ali Saidi in Contra Costa would literally sit down, 5, 6, 7 cases he would bring, and we would just go through them one by one by one by one together. It's also about building trust with those communities, right? Because they are vulnerable communities. Any touch point with law enforcement is frightening for them. And so ensuring that we're partnering, also sitting down with the public defender's office and working with the model, certainly that they have in place as well, is something that will be hugely, hugely important. And also then educating the community as well, right? And having them understand how this DA's office is going and what role they play in light of this new federal administration. So urgency and accuracy are certainly two touch points that are very important to that work.
Thank you all. Sick, you have the next audience question.
Yes, thank you. And we're gonna have LD, you'll go ahead and start us off with this one. The question is, how would you ensure that the DA's office is efficiently and equitably leveraging California laws that create opportunities for resentencing? For example, PC 1170D, 1172.1, etc. How would you also improve the DA office's post-conviction resentencing unit? LD, when you start, the timer will start.
Right. And so this is staffing and resources and making sure that there are folks assigned to the work and dedicated to the work to move the cases along. And this is a resource question. So one of the things that was a frustration to me in prior years was that we were, the law was rapidly changing, but our staff was not ramping up to account for the change. And so people were being asked to do more work with the same resources. And so, one of the things I really want to see happening with the budget is that we start making this push to staff the office commensurate with these new initiatives, and that's why I was sort of talking about, when looking at the racially blind charging policy, pushing hard to acknowledge that there are significant staffing increases that have to happen to be in compliance to supply the data and the transparency that's mandated by the law. Similarly, these are new-ish requirements to review these cases instead of pulling existing staff from essential work. Part of that balance is to recognize this is new work. And we need to staff up this new work so that we're not seeing, other parts of the office essentially collapse because we don't have the resources to shift over. And so, that is something that has to be reflected in our budget so that we can staff up these departments, and have the policies written and in place to guide the discretion of the lawyers doing the work, and then keep that work flowing and return to like we had a unit and personnel and staff that was doing that. I think it was a 3-person unit, and then once the work was kind of gotten under control, a policy was in place, they were able to bring it down to a 2-person unit and repurpose another individual. But it's going to be about resourcing it and staffing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Venus, you're up next.
Thank you. So one of the things you have to do as an executive is be creative and thoughtful in how you get money. And you have to pull down money from a lot of different places. And so in Contra Costa, we knew that the budget was tight. The county's purse was tight. And so we partnered with For the People, and we piloted and got funds from the legislature to pilot in 5 counties, DA's offices proactively resentencing folks, and thinking creatively, thinking outside the box, right? Partnering and leveraging relationships, which is something you have to do in order to get the work done, is something that we were able to do. We've done that at Cal DOJ as well. I have brought in For the People, and they are working with us around resentencing. We also in Contra Costa work with the Public Defender's Office and Health Right 360, because we had just a couple of lawyers, and it takes more than a couple of lawyers, right? You have to be it is time consuming. It is thoughtful work. It is engaging work. It is ensuring you're tapped into the victims. It is ensuring you're tapped into the community. It is ensuring you're tapped in to the person at CDCR, right, who's responsible for reentry. It's understanding the systems and how it works, and not just simply doing the work. And so leveraging relationships, partnerships, public-private partnerships, and drawing down dollars and piloting work from other places is how you do the work, and how I would commit to continuing to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yibin, go ahead and jump in when they'll start the timer.
Yes, I share my colleagues' views on this one, which is that, look, it's very, very important that we properly staff the work that we do. And this is one important function in the office among so many. As a head of an office, it's very important to me that my staff are properly supported. They have the tools they need to do the work, and they're not overwhelmed by the work. We cannot be successful in the work we do if we take on too much with not enough resources. And so in that, we have at the City Attorney's Office saw numerous opportunities for grant funding. We recently received grant funding on a police accountability grant that my office sought in collaboration with the police department. We are currently in the process of seeking federal funding on victim witness advocates. It's the same kind of drive that would bring to the DA's office in looking for places where we can have funding so that we can ensure that resources are adequately deployed and that my staff have what they need to do excellent work for the community. Thank you.
Thank you all. We're going to go to the last audience question. Again, our apologies for not being able to ask all the excellent questions from the audience, but we need time to have for the candidates to do their closing statements. So this will be the last audience question, and I think Venus, you're up to go first. The question is, how do you feel about community practitioners playing a more hands-on role in structuring secure track step-down models as a result of SB 823? And what measures will you take to reduce the incarceration of young people and expand access to restorative justice programs for young people?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned, I think a real thoughtful program that we were doing in Contra Costa that I'd like to bring back and bring to Alameda County is the Restorative Justice Program for Youth. It was a program that specifically focused on looking at data points throughout the county of where youth lived who were committing offenses, where the offenses were being committed, because sometimes those are not in the same locations, and understanding that the same type of accountability needed to be held irrespective of where a youth found themselves within the county. And so really trying to thoughtfully, one, get the youth and their parent and their guardian on board. Two, the victim had to be on board. That was a requirement for the restorative justice program, because accountability and healing are two very important components of restorative justice. And certainly giving the youth enough time, because sometimes they will make a mistake or there will be a bump in the road, but giving them that safety net and those resources in order to actually to be successful. And we really had some beautiful outcomes as a result of that program. And so partnering with community, partnering with experts, because again, it's not for me to come in and always tell community what they need or how they need it. I found doing listening circles when I was in Oakland with Our Joy was really important. We went into schools, we went into community and held listening circles on the weekends and the evenings, and really heard from community, but also ensured that we didn't leave community fractured and feeling kind of in a broken place after being vulnerable and sharing with us. So those are practices and models that I would plan on continuing to use.
Thank you. Yibin, you're up next.
As I shared earlier, I fully support the view that youth recidivism is much, much, much better handled through care and through having family and school and community connected services, and that having those services be reflective of the values, the backgrounds, the languages, the culture uniqueness of the youth that are experiencing the justice system. And so it is really, really important to me that we find funding to support youth so that they are able to find their way out of the criminal justice system and find their way into and back to their families, their schools, and their communities. That's really where they belong. The state has made it very clear that that's where the state would like to see it happen. Data has shown that that's what actually works. And so that's where I'm committed to effectuating those policies. Thank you.
Thank you. LD?
So one of the things that really came up when the legislation was coming around was trauma-informed care. One of the conversations that I'd had with folks is that, hurt people hurt people. And, if we're not looking at these youth through a lens of what has happened in their lives to bring them to this point, then we're not going to make lots of or much progress with reintegration and, reentry. And so, the other thing that I had an eye towards and been working on, previously is that there's mental health services that folks need. Undiagnosed mental disorders is a particular problem in communities of color. There are some challenges culturally with people wanting to acknowledge that there's a mental health challenge. I worked heavily on this when I was in head of the children's committee on the Mental Health Advisory Board, where we were working in partnership with other partners in the mental health arena to drill into supporting parents to be able to identify when their young people were experiencing mental health issues and tackle that. And so we were looking at how could we bring developmental disability services and mental health services to bear the assessments and the resources in partnership with, community-based organizations and other departments. And then obviously there's always the need to engage with victims and, make sure that they have the supportive services through the Victim Witness Bureau and things of that nature in doing that work. And so I moved that forward
Thank you, LD.
Mhm.
Thank you to all the candidates and all the participants. We started with about 145 people on this Zoom tonight, and I think I'm told we still have more than 100 people tuning in. We are now gonna head towards the closing statements by the candidates. So I think following the rotation we've been following, Yibin, you'll go first, LD will go next, and then Venus, you'll go after that. So you will each have 5 minutes to make your case and to provide your closing statements on why you should be the next appointed DA of Alameda County. And after the closing statements, we'll announce a couple of things for the audience. So if we can get the clock ready for 5 minutes. And then Yibin, you will go first.
Sounds good. Should I wait for the clock?
Yes. Let's just make sure we have it up and running.
And here it comes. There you go.
All right, go for it.
Thank you very much again for the invitation for me to be here. And I've shared a lot about my experience and values. I want to share, I want to conclude with just one story early on in my career, both as a manager and as a prosecutor, that really drove me to this work. And it's a case that I personally handled. It involved uh, a an elderly person and over 70, Mrs. Sharon Curto, who hired a contractor to paint her house. This contractor took advantage of her and ultimately charged her more than $50,000 to paint a house, which is absolutely crazy. Um, this was a case that the district attorney's office did not handle. The Santa Monica City Attorney's Office took it on. I took it on. This was a case where we litigated that case so heavily for Mrs. Curto because I believed that she deserved every bit of restitution because this was essentially, she spent significant amount of her life savings on this work and she did not get the work that she deserved. Um, and this was a case that did not even occur in the city of Santa Monica, but it did not matter to me. So one of the things that I had to do was to handle a ton of fighting over whether or not the city attorney's office even had jurisdiction to prosecute the case because Mrs. Curto lived in Manhattan Beach, about 4 cities away. We ultimately won those motions because the contractor had an office storefront in the city of Santa Monica. I was so committed to fighting for Mrs. Curto every step of the way. We fought that case in the appellate division. We fought that case in the Court of Appeal. We even litigated that case in the California Supreme Court. And in the appellate process, it was a case that was not handled by the Attorney General's office. The city attorney's office, just like in the trial court, took that case on, litigated that case over the years, and we got Mrs. Curto at least much of the money that she deserved. And we made law on this topic. And I look forward to advocating to make better law on this topic because she should have gotten more. It was a multi-year effort where we brought victim advocates, we brought prosecutors, multiple prosecutors. Since the beginning of my work. I had subsequently been promoted, but still personally handled the appeal in that case, along with having line prosecutors help handle the case. It did not matter that Mrs. Curto did not live in the city of Santa Monica. And it did not matter that Mrs. Curto may have sought civil remedies. I felt like it was an obligation on my part as a prosecutor to do right by her. And I feel that we did everything we could, and I look forward to doing even more in the name of Mrs. Curto and advocating for legislative change. And that's something a little bit about me, about why I continue to do this work in Santa Monica and in Alameda. And I really appreciate the time and I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about me And I thank you for your support.
Thank you so much, Yibin. LD, you're next, and you'll have 5 minutes. That will start once you start.
I want to thank you all for pulling together this forum so that we can have this discussion about, ourselves and some of the work that we've done. So, I've stated previously, I have every intention of bringing balance back into the district attorney's office and the administration of justice. I think that the office has is damaged and needs a return to the basics. That includes, training, personnel, and where they're located, and developing the skill set to just competently do the legally mandated job that we're supposed to be doing. And I bring to that a record of problem solving. I collaborate with whomever I need to in order to drill into the challenge that is placed before me. When I was asked to figure out a solution for the substance use mental health population coming into our jails, that resulted in me building a unit, finding the funding outside of the office and outside of the county, and building a program, and then working in collaboration with our community-based partners to continuously find other financial resources to add a van and a mobile team and all the things we needed to continue to meet the particular need of the community for that program. Expanding the collaborative courts and engaging with the guidebook, dealing with a multi-county collaboration that was collapsing in the face of the pandemic, and bringing that program under the DA's office to maintain the collaboration and keep that work going. At the same time, as I was leading around the state, encouraging other offices to adopt a collaborative model in their own offices. It was the first time under my leadership at the state level that the California District Attorney's Office trained around collaborative courts and alternatives to incarceration. I built the relationships within the organization such that I trained almost all of the DA's offices in the state, sent representation to learn about how they could too bring this work into their agencies. And so it's this, passion for problem solving, working across the departments, across the jurisdictions, and when needed across the country to identify programs, resources that drive the work forward. It's where I excel. It's what I've been doing in the district attorney's office for the last several years. And it's the work and that vision for the work that I would bring to the role of the district attorney. But also at the same time, making sure, as I've done in all the protocols I've written, that victims are not forgotten, that they're included in the development of the programming and a part of that conversation throughout the process. And so I think I bring the skill set, the experience, and I also already have the relationships in the county in order to immediately hit the ground running on day one, driving these programs forward to help relieve some of the suffering that's happening right now in the county surrounding, crime, the property crime spike, and other things that are going on. And so I look forward to the opportunity to do this work and to continue to serve the people of Alameda County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LD. Venus, you're next.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity this evening. And excuse me for my raspy voice, a lot of talking in the past few days. I think there are three things that make me the person for this position. One, being a skilled prosecutor, 2, being an executive, and 3, being a daughter of Oakland and Alameda County. Being a seasoned prosecutor means you understand how the system works. You've prosecuted cases, which I have, from misdemeanors to felonies. You have sat down with victims. You have gone to their homes and sat in their living rooms and given them news about justice, but also delivering perhaps not the best news after a jury verdict. I have sat down with children who have been molested by family members. I have sat down with witnesses who have had to come in and testify in homicide cases. So when we talk about victims, I also include individuals who have witnessed the crime, who have vicarious trauma, right? From witnessing horrific incidents and wanting to understand and make sure that those people feel safe and feel seen as well. Public safety means something different for different communities, but everybody wants to be safe at the end of the day. It's important that your district attorney's office sees that, hears that, and understands that. It's an office that's connected to its community, but it's also an office that is holding offenders accountable fairly and equitably. But businesses have to thrive. People have to be able to walk down the street. People have to be able to park their cars without fear of it getting broken into or stolen constantly. Businesses, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them being hit over and over and over and over again. We can't have that in our communities. It's not healthy for our economically, for our children, right? For the vitality of our communities, for people to be able to walk down the street to their local store, to be able to pick up something to eat. You know my executive experience because I'm sure you've heard us talk. I'm sure you've read our materials. I run the 2nd largest Department of Justice in the country, second to US DOJ. I manage law enforcement operations. I manage prosecutions. I manage appeals, criminal and civil. I have stood up new programs. I have stood up new units. It's not easy work. The office, as much as the community, needs stability and needs healing. I have not been and will be unburdened by the fractured past that has been experienced in the last couple of years. It's important to come in with a fresh perspective, honoring the great things about the office that make it what it is, in the office that I experienced when I was there. It's where I cut my teeth. I'm proud to be a prosecutor from Alameda County, but we've got to turn the page and we've got to look toward the future. And we have to think about doing things a little bit differently. And when I say differently, I mean data-driven, I mean thoughtful, I mean holistic, which means including everyone's perspective. I thank you for your time, for your commitment, for your energy, and I look forward to making Alameda County safer for everyone. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, all of you, so much. As a reminder, we have extended this invitation to all the finalists, and those who could make it have made it today. Just I saw a point about it earlier, whether or not we invited all the finalists to the panel, and we have. And then Sik, I'll pass it on to you for our closing items.
All right. So to close us out, we're gonna provide this. There's a link that folks can go to. So we'll just leave you with a few words as we're closing out. Like Yoel said, thank you to the candidates who were able to show up today. We, as part of the Alameda County DA Accountability Table, do believe that it is very important for the community to be able to have not just access, but to have a voice in who will be in key positions throughout the county, especially in the DA's seat. It's important for us to have a voice because the role of the DA has a lot of power. District attorneys in the United States have historically and even continue to play a huge role, not just in public safety, but also in what mass incarceration looks like in this country. And so you'll see here on the screen share, we're asking folks to contact the Board of Supervisors and let them know who you believe should be the next pick for the Alameda County DA. The timeline for this is that the Alameda County Board of Supervisors will be deliberating on January 20th, and they will be looking to appoint a new district attorney for Alameda County on February 4th. And we want to, just encourage people to reach out and, let their voices be heard, because it's important that we have a DA in Alameda County that's able to provide the people with what we need, rather than being pressured by billionaires with political agendas to drive us backwards into failed tough on crime policies. We want people who will prioritize safety and accountability in ways that help our communities thrive and become stronger, rather than leaving them fractured, as we've seen so many times in the past. So once again, thank you to all the candidates who are able to participate today. And thank you to all of the attendees who logged in today and who stayed with us to the end. Thank you. That's the end of our forum. Have a nice day. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.